All right, so we're diving into Darwin's Unpack on the origin of species. We've got a lot to unpack. I mean, this work was monumental, really changed how we see the natural world. But you know what gets me? He starts with something so relatable, so simple. Domestication.
Yeah, it's brilliant. He starts with something everyone understood back then. Think about it. Selective breeding. Farmers, they've been shaping species for ages, right? Juicier tomatoes, fluffier sheep. Darwin's pointing out those little variations, those differences. They're the heart of his whole theory.
It's like he's saying, hey, look at how breeders make these crazy pigeons, different dogs, all that. Now imagine that in the wild. But instead of a person picking what traits they want, it's the environment doing the selecting.
Exactly. And that's where fitness comes in, right?
Yeah.
Not like being the best, but being a good fit for where you are, what's around you. Like, Darwin uses giraffes. It's not just about reaching high leaves, it's surviving when there's not much food. Longer necks, better chance, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Add that on.
So it's not just about being the strongest, fastest. It's about making the most of what's in your little corner of the world.
Yeah, exactly. And that takes us to this whole struggle for existence thing. Darwin's not sugarcoating it. He's saying it's competitive out there. Food, mates, even just space to exist. That all drives which variations win out.
Let's break that down a bit.
Oh.
Survival of the fittest. People get that wrong all the time. It's not some big battle royale, is it?
No, not at all. Think of it more like constant pressure. If you've got a little edge, you live a bit longer, have more babies, that little edge spreads over time. Big changes. He even talks about, get this, wheat. Like, different types competing. People then, they'd have seen that in their gardens, right? Just shows this struggle is everywhere, even our backyards.
You've got all these variations within a species. You've got this constant fight for survival. And nature's the one deciding what works best. It's all connected. So elegant. But Darwin wasn't just making big claims, was he? Didn't he back it all up with hard evidence? From all sorts of fields, too.
Oh, absolutely. He was meticulous. And he pulled evidence from areas you might not expect, too. Stuff that seems totally unrelated to evolution at first glance, you know?
It really is mind-blowing to think he pulled all this together without, like, fancy labs and gene sequencing and all that. So where did he even start building this case, this mountain of evidence?
He went way back to the fossils, right? Even then, people knew fossils were like dot leftovers from creatures that weren't around anymore. Darwin said, hey, these aren't just curiosities, they're snapshots of how life changed over time, like puzzle pieces. And even if we don't have the whole picture yet,
we can still see the picture, right?
Yeah.
Like finding a dinosaur bone in your backyard kind of makes you realize things haven't always been this way.
Exactly. And the more fossils we dig up, the more we fill in those gaps. But he didn't stop there. Darwin looked at where species are, like all over the planet. Remember, he traveled on the Beagle? He's seeing these patterns, right? Similar creatures, but miles apart, oceans apart. He said, that's not random, that's migration, adaptation, finding a new place and changing to fit in.
So, like, one species starts somewhere, spreads out, faces different stuff, and boom.
Yeah.
New but related species. Mm-hmm. Amazing how he connected the dots. Didn't he also spend a bunch of time on, what was it, morphology?
Yeah. Morphology, it's studying the shapes of things, basically, how living things are built. And this gave Darwin some seriously strong evidence. He noticed, like, bone structures, similar bones, different creatures, even totally different purposes. The human hand, for example. We can do so much with these things.
But then you look at a whale flipper.
Yeah.
Or a bat's wing.
Same bones, fundamentally, just remodeled over time, different jobs. But that underlying structure, Darwin said, that's common ancestry, like a family resemblance, passed down. It's powerful stuff. Shows how connected life really is.
Incredible, right. Figuring all this out without the tools we have now. But I gotta imagine not everyone just accepted this. There had to be pushback.
Oh, tons. Darwin knew he was shaking things up, challenging, like, deeply held beliefs. And one of the big ones, fossils. People said, if evolution's gradual, where's the in-between stuff? Where are those missing links?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people still bring those up today.
Exactly. Darwin's answer, the fossil record's just incomplete. He said it's like trying to understand a movie from a few still photos. You get the idea, but you miss a lot, right? All the transitions. He said those in-between fossils, they're probably out there, just haven't been found yet.
That's a bold statement, knowing how much people were scrutinizing his work. But he didn't just stop at fossils, did he? Things like, I don't know, the eye. So complex, it's hard to picture that evolving in stages, going from a light-sensitive spot on your skin to an actual eye.
Even Darwin struggled with that one, honestly. But he said, hey, even simple light sensitivity, that's useful, right? Tells you if something's moving, maybe there's a shadow. Over time, that simple structure gets refined, more complex, and eventually, you've got the amazing variety of eyes we see today.
So each tiny improvement builds on the one before, from basic to complex. Elegant solution to a really tough problem. But Darwin didn't just focus on how bodies evolved. He talked about behavior too, right?
Yeah.
Like how bees build those intricate hives. It's wild, right? How he explained these big leaps in evolution. But here's one that always gets me. How do all these little changes, these adaptations, actually lead to whole new species? Like, that's a big jump.
That's the core of it all, isn't it? Speciation. Darwin said it's gradual, driven by, you guessed it, natural selection. Picture this. A population gets divided. A mountain range, a river, whatever. Now they're dealing with different environments, different pressures.
So those good traits, the ones that help them survive, they're going to be different for each group now, right?
Exactly. Over time, those groups, isolated, they keep adapting to their own little worlds, and they drift further and further apart. Darwin said, given enough time, those differences, they add up, until they're so different they can't even breed with each other anymore. Boom, new species.
Like two branches on a tree. Same trunk, but they're reaching for different light. Eventually, they're practically separate trees themselves.
Perfect way to put it. And just like that, the tree of life branches out. Hence, the amazing diversity we've got today. But that makes you think, if there's always new species popping up, shouldn't there be way more of those in-between forms in the fossil record?
Yeah, it's that missing link problem again.
Right. Darwin's answer, as new, better species show up, they kind of push out the older models. It's like limited resources, right? The best adapted, they hog the spotlight.
So the missing links, they might have been there, but got replaced by their own descendants. Outcompeted, outsurvived.
Exactly. This constant dance, changing, adapting. Some groups make it big, others fade away. Kind of puts things in perspective, doesn't it? We're just one little part of this huge, ever-changing story.
It really does. And speaking of perspective, Darwin, he went there, he said, humans, we're part of this too. Descended from the same ancestors as apes. Can you imagine the reaction back then? Victorian England.
Talk about shaking things up. He only touches on it on the origin of species, knows it's a bit much for people. But the message is clear. We're not above the laws of nature. We're part of this whole grand experiment, just like everything else.
It's amazing what he figured out. Just by observing, thinking it through, he set the stage for how we understand life itself. Not just the past, but how it all works.
And it's still unfolding. Antibiotic resistance, new viruses, Darwin's ideas are more relevant than ever. He wasn't just explaining what happened. He gave us the tools to understand what's going to happen.
Absolutely. This has been a wild ride diving into Darwin with you. We scratched the surface, obviously. This is deep stuff. But hopefully you get it now, how elegant, how powerful his ideas were, still are.
If you take one thing away from this, let it be curiosity. Go read Darwin yourself. You'll see the world in a whole new light.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, here's something to chew on. What would Darwin think of the world today? Over 150 years after his book. It's something to think about as we keep exploring this incredible story of life on Earth. Until next time, keep those questions coming, keep learning, and keep on diving deep.